Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's November 24th, 2019. I'm up here near the third food forest. A video I posted recently showed me getting the garlic cloves and the shallots planted in our new permanent raised beds here. And as a result, Kate actually reached out to me and said, geez, how wide are you putting your paths in? Because these are wood chip paths. And if you watched our videos for a while, you know that I'm a big proponent of getting as many wood chips if they are available in your area. And we use them in several different ways on our site. Some of the ways in our food forest. But whenever I build our permanent raised beds, because we don't have soil here, we have gravel. And so by building, either creating our compost for our permanent raised beds and then getting wood chips to create the paths, gradually over time this all turns into be usable soil. And we can just, after the wood chips have broken down in 3 to 4 years, that ends up being great soil that gets incorporated into our beds. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is about how I'm utilizing or how I'm determining the width of the paths that we use here on site, and why I'm choosing to go wider in some cases with the paths and fairly narrow in other cases. Now, Curtis Stone, I think his site is The Urban Farmer. Curtis Stone, you Google him, he's got lots of great content online. He uses a very narrow path, and I don't believe he uses wood chips. Now, he may have in the past, but any of the videos I've seen, he hasn't used wood chips. And he uses, I think, 8-inch wide paths. Now, he's a young guy and still pretty flexible at his age. I think he's in his 30s. So he can maneuver around. I'm a pretty big guy. My shoe size is size 13, and when I'm wearing big boots, there's no way that I'd have to be able to flip going from side to side with my feet in order not to disrupt the beds. So that's one reason that I don't go with 8-inch wide paths. The other reason is Thea and I both, when we're working in the garden, when I'm putting down transplants or when we're harvesting and all, there's a lot of time I spend on my knees or hunched over. Now, although the wood chips that we put in here right now were at the same level last month when I put these in, or within the last couple months, they were at the same top level as the compost beds. However, because of the airspace in between all of the chips, they tend to settle much more quickly than the soil compacts down. So as a result, we end up with really nice permanent raised beds with lower paths, which makes it easier for drying out the beds early in the spring, getting more solar radiation, warming up the beds in our cold temperate climate, keeping the water from really saturating during times of heavy downpour and all. And if there is erosion from these permanent raised beds, that compost makes its way into the wood chips. My neighbors are getting their equipment out right now, so ignore the tractor sounds in the background. So I guess that I'd say that our wood chip paths are about a minimum of 16 inches wide to make it easy for us to put in our transplants, easily move between the plants without brushing into some of our plants, get quite large. Our cabbages really extend out. Many of our brassicas really bulge out. Our tomato plants, although we have them in 2-foot diameter cages as well, they stick out there. But because we're interplanting not just tomatoes and basil and all of our brassicas all over the place, I really like to have some really good paths for us to work in without damaging the plants that are there and without getting so uncomfortable positioning ourselves when we're working in the paths. But 16 inches wide is really our minimum. We go up to really wide in some cases. So I thought what I'd do is put my helmet cam on and just take a look at this area here and talk about the transformation as a result of what we've done over this season. Now, it's taken me years to get to this point where we are now. It's approximately 10 years ago when this was all woods in this area. and we brought in heavy equipment, dug up all of the trees and the root balls, the trunks, and buried all of those materials underground in a large gravel-rich area, and covered it all up. And it took 3 years of me basically driving over it, smoothing it out, picking up all the rocks until the ground was pretty flat with a nice gentle slope heading down that direction. So that's hugelkultur pits. It's a term. I'll put a link to a video describing that somewhat in the upper right hand corner. However, on top of the hugelkultur pits, it was just sand and gravel, so nothing that you could really grow anything in other than weeds. So what we elected to do was pick some places, and we had three beds here initially, but everything else is I could get loads of wood chips. So this whole area here, and I'll explain a little bit better when I have the helmet cam on, was all wood chips 2 feet deep on top of the hugelkultur pit. Now, over the last 3 years, and it took me a few years to get enough wood chips to cover up that area. Well, that area became saturated with moisture as a result of those wood chips holding all of all of the moisture in that area. And as a result, I would turn it over when I would drive the tractor back and forth each year. Not turn it over intentionally, but the chips that were on the surface would get mixed down into the rest of the wood chips going below. And then I discovered, as I was adding more compost to the beds, some compost would get mixed in with the wood chips as well. And as a result, that all turned into great soil. But one of the problems that I knew potentially would happen is, over the years, those hugelkultur pits that are multiple feet deep, minimally 8 feet deep, down to 16 feet deep anyways, those areas started to compress, consolidate, and as a result there were lower areas, and those would be areas where the water would tend to stay there all summer long during the really hot times that we get here when we don't get any rainfall. So that would stay even moist, so when I go up there with a tractor, there'd be spots that I'd start to get stuck in. And that's because those were recessed areas as a result of consolidation, compaction, of the compression of all of the woody material that had been decaying over the years down below. So we accomplish things by sequestering carbon, capturing water, capturing nutrients, not letting things go up into the atmosphere. All of those things worked out great. But I discovered that the area that I was just going to build on here, it really was undulating the soil surface. And the other problem I had was this section right behind me here, and I'll show you with a helmet cam. That was where I had our compost beds for putting garlic in, 3 of these, and they were all in line with where trees were, because those were trees we wanted to save. And so I ended up digging those all out. So this year there were sweet potatoes in there and blue potatoes in there. Sweet potatoes didn't turn out, but the blue potatoes did great, and because the deer ate all the sweet potatoes and the rabbits did. So I ended up reshaping this whole area, and that's what I'm going to explain next. And there'll be some GoPro footage showing you how I actually did it with the mini excavator, the dump trailer, and the tractor. So bear with me, the video will come up next. Okay, I've got the helmet cam on now, and to orient you, we're in the 3rd food forest area. The 2nd food forest area is all going from the road right down to the canal system there. But this area there, you can see a little bit of the dark soil over there. That's what's left of the large composting system we've had. You see a mound of green there. The deer have been going right through, and this time of year is when the deer go for all the horseradish. All of the comfrey has been consumed through all of the food forest. Now they've eaten all of the horseradish. The wind has blown the rest over. Here's one of our fruit tree and nut tree berms that was next to a swale that I'm filling in now. I no longer need that swale, so I put logs and lumber in that swale, and then I'm covering it up with soil as I'm digging it up from other locations. So we got peaches, plums, pecans, some red buds, and that's all I could think of that's in this berm here. Next to it, where the soil is being put there now, there'll be a fairly 2-layer hedgerow system going in there, and as these trees get up there, it'll be a sub-canopy kind of height, except for the couple of pecans there. There'll be a full canopy. But the rest of it will be a sub-canopy area, and so this will create great habitats for many of our beneficial insects and many of the mammals and reptiles as well. Over here, this area where we see a path of wood chips here that's 6 foot wide, this is an area that was just compost. For years we grew garlic in this path right here, which was all compost. Like it was like what this is what that used to look like. And we grew garlic for several years, but as you could see the tree there, you see the drip line. Well, the roots extend out beyond that drip line of the tree there. However, within about 6 to 8 feet, there were lots of the root hairs working their way up into the compost, making the harvesting of root type vegetables or produce such as garlic and all, making it very difficult. I'd be disrupting the roots on that maple tree. And the maple tree was competing with the nutrients from the soil that I had there. So this year I decided to change the system. I decided to sculpt out. I dug out all the compost that was here. I piled it here, and then I put new compost on top of it on this spot here. And where the compost was, where I dug all that compost out, I came in and started putting wood chips here. Hopefully next year I'll get to put another layer of wood chips here. But as you see this 6 foot wide path of wood chips here, I'm going to mirror that on the opposite side over here. So there'll be 2 paths that will be soil building paths that will be future not composting. One side will be left as a place where we can drive the utility vehicle back and forth down in here. But the rest of it, it'll be all hedgerow eventually. So to start it off, I started putting compost in a row right down here, and we'll be putting berry plants right in here as one type of hedgerow. I want these berry plants to be able to get at least 3 to 4 feet tall as one of the wind diffusers that's going to break that. In that direction is, this direction's west, so our winds come out of our west, out of our north, and out of our south. So I've got the tree lined here far enough away that when the winds come out of the south, that will break the wind here. These, as these trees and these hedgerows get larger, they'll break the wind here, but none of them are going to cast too much shadow on these permanent raised beds. So we'll have wood chips on either side that can build soil. A part of the food forest that's going to have a hedgerow creating habitats for many different beneficial insects, reptiles, small mammals, and amphibians. And the same thing right here, we'll have more productive berry plants here. They'll all provide multiple functions. This area here, the permanent raised beds are purposely designed to be higher, and that's why I decided to change the whole system that was here, because as the hugelkultur pits sank down some and as the wood chips decomposed, well, this became lower. I want this to be higher so that when we get our early frost areas, and those frost areas can work their way down into this lower area here, and this climate here, the microclimate here, will be warmer than the microclimate down here that can catch a frost. So hopefully that makes sense. So I've got the tape measure now, and so this path ranges from its widest spot to its narrowest spot. Let's turn around here. Here's a narrow spot here. This is about 18 inches wide approximately. Some places are about 24 inches wide. This one will be the same. Each one of these will be between 18 and 24 inches wide. This bed here is about 30 inches wide. How wide is this one? About 30 inches wide. And this one here is wider. About 50 inches wide. So one of the things I'm doing differently now that you'll be able to see in some of the video that follows, some GoPro footage, is years ago, everything I did with the wheelbarrow. I'd take every wheelbarrow load of compost, every wheelbarrow load of wood chips, whatever it was, I'd go pull up to the area and dump it. And that would create sloped sides as I would dump the material down. And that created angles as I would build the system. Later on, I was able to, as I was able to get larger areas, I loaded the materials into the front end loader on the tractor and I would dump it, but that also would create these sloped sides. Now, by using Bumblebee with a grading bucket, now the grading bucket is a bucket that doesn't have teeth and it's about 30 inches wide, I could come down here and lay the material down all the way down in here, then drive alongside of it and use the bucket to, the sides would be sloped, and I'd use the bucket of the excavator to push that wall up so it'd be squared off. And then when I come in, I dump the next load, it'd have this side square and this side sloped, and I'd come down and I'd do it. So each one of these beds actually have squared up sides, so it's straight down the wood chips as opposed to being sloped sides. Hopefully that makes sense. So this season I was able to get one bit of compost set down there for the one of the hedgerows. I was able to get 3 new beds built. Now, where everything that you see where these 3 beds are, right up to over to here, was all wood chips. I'll be creating one more, I think I'll be creating one more 30-inch wide compost bed right here. And there'll be wood chips from that point on all the way up over to this next row of, sorry, I'm trying to go through this area. This next area where there's peaches, plums, there's a spruce there as well. There's persimmons in here. And so this whole area will be one more section of food forest here. That's going to be another isolation place. And over here is another swale system. Now I've got to come in and dig out, clean out this swale system here. But again, these swales in this area create these microclimates. I hope to do the same thing over here. One of the garlic beds from years ago is right underneath this tarp here. And lots of wood chips on either side of it. So that's been building soil. But I plan on modifying this whole system in here similarly to what I did here, but it takes tremendous volumes of material to actually build these systems, and it takes quite some time. Even with the amount of wood chips and materials that we get here, it does take some time. Well, I'm back, so hopefully that explanation was a long-winded explanation with an answer to the question of, geez, how wide do I make my wood chip paths? It's evolved over time, and it's quite variable depending on tree locations and the functions of the different areas as well. I look at every place that I'm putting wood chips as a slow soil building system. So those are areas that will be used over and over again, and I may be harvesting some of that soil and using it in other areas and coming in and replacing it with more wood chips in the future. So the width of the paths is really dependent, because if I'm going to be harvesting some of the soil from these areas, I want to easily be able to come in so that I don't have to use a wheelbarrow in the future as well. So that's it as far as this stuff goes. What will follow next is some GoPro footage where I was using Bumblebee, using Bumblebee's a mini excavator, using the dump trailer, and using Optimus Prime. Now this whole area is a big mud pie, and even before it started raining, this got really muddy as well. So the moisture retention in this area is absolutely amazing. The places where I determined there was the least amount of moisture was right underneath the trees, where the compost actually was dried out some as a result of all of that tree doing all that exchange with the soil. So if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. And by all means, folks, have a great day. Bye-bye now.